In this video, I'm going to show you how to remove all of the color from an image and then apply a layer over the top of the image that works as a kind of color filter. So this is part of our work on working with monochromatic color schemes. So basically that just means that there is one color and there may be certain tints or values of that. So I'm in an image, and before we get started with removing the color, I'm going to do a little bit of editing of this particular image. The first thing I'm going to do is to show you how to do some simple editing processes like rotation and cropping. So I'm going to press Control A, Control A, and what you should see is that the marquee around the whole image highlights. And then I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, Rotate. Now, I'll hover over here on the edge. Now, you may not need to do this with your image if you don't feel like it looks crooked or anything like that, but I just want to give you a sense of how to go about this process. So let's say I'm going to just rotate it just a little bit like so. Okay. And I've just clicked on the move tool here to take myself out of that. So now what I'm going to do is create a new cropping area. Now, a couple ways you could do this. You could use a rectangle tool and then go through a process of cropping, or I could just use this crop tool here. So I'll click on this one and I'll pick a spot surrounding the image, try to make it symmetrical in the view so it's got the same size on all sides, and then I'll hit the check mark up at the top. Okay, and it will go ahead and crop that. Right. Next, what I'm going to do is remove the color from the image. So to do that, I go to Image Adjustments, or rather Mode, Image Mode, and then Grayscale. Right, you'll get a message asking if it's okay to discard the color, and we're going to say discard. All right, so now it's going to be all in grays and white and black. All right, the next thing to do is to create a new layer. So I have the menu over here on the right. I'm going to click on Layers, and you'll notice that there's already a layer in there called Background. To create a new layer, I'm going to click on this tool down here, create a new layer, and you'll notice that it's called Layer 1. And one could go and change the name of the layer if necessary, but we'll keep it as the default is for the moment. And just so you know, if you want to change the layer, whichever is the current one, you just click on it. So right now, Layer 1 is my current layer. Now we removed the color by going to the grayscale mode, but we're going to add color. So we need to change it to another mode. So I'm going to go to Image Mode, and I'll change it to the RGB. So it'll be the red, green, blue color channels. And I'll go ahead and permit it to flatten the image. Okay, next I will apply a color filter. Photoshop has other ways of making color filters, so this is a little bit different. And I'll notice when we flattened the image that we eliminated the layer. So I'm going to recreate it. I'm going to click on the Create New Layer, and I will then make a rectangle. So I'm going to go over here to the rectangle tool, and as I mentioned before, I know I'm in the current layer because it's a slightly toned to that lighter gray. I'm going to make a rectangle around the entire image here. Right now it's defaulting to a gray color. What I'm going to do now is double click on the color box over here, and I'll go and I'll choose another color. You can use some of these settings here, but I'm just going to visually make this selection. I'll make it a kind of maybe a bluish green color, and then I'm going to drag the the circle over here. Okay. So maybe I'll bring it all the way over to the corner here and click on OK. And I'll go to the paint bucket tool and I will click on here. I'm going to go to the paint bucket tool and I will click, say OK, and I clicked in that area. Okay, now let's go back to the layers and let's turn off that layer. So yes, it is a separate layer and it is sitting on top of the background. Right, so now what I'm going to do is change the opacity of it to maybe 20%, and you can kind of adjust as necessary. But, that's basically what we're looking for in this, is to apply a color over the top and then, adjust the opacity so that we see the image through. And I'm going to save my file here so I don't lose it. I will save it to my desktop. And I'm going to call this after or filter, something just to distinguish it from the first one that I started with, and say OK. Now, as you can see, the name has been adapted up here, and it's followed by a PSD file, which is a Photoshop file. I'm also going to create a JPEG image out of this image. I'll export it as the JPEG. If you go to Save As, you'll get some options, but not this image type. So I'm going to cancel this and go to Export, Export As. And it's going to format it as this JPEG type. You'll see that there's some other options, but I'm going to keep it as a JPEG and click on Export. Okay, same thing. I would save it to the same spot and